Hey y'all, it's your queen J Lotus Pimp Sunkiss coming at y'all right quick, right fast. Maybe with a Royale movie review. Now, this gonna be my first time doing a whole movie review, so let's see how it go. I got high hopes for it all. Now, the movie we're here to review and discuss is none other than The Skeleton Key, which came out in 2005. Okay, and baby, this movie has so many twists and turns. I don't really know how else to tell you exactly what it's about, but I'm gonna give you a quick little rundown, and then the rest will have to be explained and reviewed throughout the review. Okay, so in simple terms, we got Caroline Ellis, who is played by Kate Hudson, and she is a hospice nurse, honey. So she got some things in her background concerning her family dynamics and issues with her parentals and everything that have motivated her to set out on her own, independent of the whole corporation, if you will, that she was working for before. And she wants to do something more intimate to be able to relate and interact with her patients. And this is also her dealing with some guilt, okay? And we'll hold off on the detailing of that. So when she gets to her new job in New Orleans, caring for this elderly man by the name of Ben Devereaux, who's played by John Hurt. So she's there to take care of him. Seems as though he had a stroke. He was paralyzed, unable to talk, all that. And he lives alone in this big old house with his wife, who is Violet Devereaux and played by Gina Rowlands. Now, Miss Caroline gets herself on over to that house, and things start looking real eerie, seeming real strange. And honey, your first time watching this movie, ain't no telling what you think is going on. You might think it's a typical supernatural film, but oh no, there's so much more than what meets the eye. Cause honey, Violet and Ben seem like just showed, kind of typical run-the-mill Southern elderly couple, and Miss Violet is having a hard time, in her premeditated grieving process of her husband going on down, getting closer to them pearly gates. And Ben may seem like he's just having a reasonable response to a traumatic health event, right? Okay, but baby, you thought, you thunk. And without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get into this here review.
I lost no time, of course, in telling my mother all that I knew, and we saw ourselves at once in a difficult and dangerous position. Something must speedily be resolved upon, and it occurred to us at last to go forth together and seek help in the neighboring hamlet. No sooner said than done. Bareheaded as we were, we ran out at once in the gathering evening in the frosty fog. The hamlet lay not many hundred yards away, though out of view on the other side of the next cove, and what greatly encouraged me, it was in an opposite direction from that whence the blind man had made his appearance, and I shall never forget how much I was cheered to see the yellow shine in doors and windows. If that is approved, it was the best of the help we were likely to get in that quarter, for you would have thought men would have been ashamed of themselves. No soul would consent to return with us to them.
So that audio that you just heard there comes from the very opening of the movie. We see some scenery of like moss trees and a few other things from nature, really beautifully eerie and everything. And then we eventually see Caroline sitting bedside of her patient, who is also a black man. So that audio that you just heard there is Caroline reading to her hospice patient at the center that she is working for at the very beginning of the movie. And when it starts out, we don't see her initially. We don't see, exactly where she is and what she's doing. We get this beautiful, eerie, nature-esque scenery of New Orleans, of course, indicated by the moss trees and certain other elements of the nature environment. So Caroline's patient is an elderly black man, and she's reading to him some text from a book. These are his final moments. And what I believe is that it's a thing that's similar to when people are on death row and they have this designated person that facilitates the party that's about to transition their final moments. And, they get a final meal or, whatever it is that they really liked, their favorite food, their favorite this and that. And so what I assume is either she had her own set of books that she keeps for those moments, or there was some type of a request that, he requested that's one of his favorite books. Maybe the nurses knew that or something, and she was reading that to him. And I specify like that because After he transitions in the midst of her reading the text from the book, she walks outside, lets her coworkers know what happens, tells them to contact the family. And as she's sitting there sorting through his things, the black lady coworker walks over to her and is like, "You gonna be waiting a while?" And she's like, "Why? I thought you already contacted them." And she's like, "Yeah, they don't want to have anything to do with him." So that's why I assumed that he wasn't able to verbalize specifically, what he may have preferred. And there was no one there as a representative to fill in the blanks. So those types of things make me wonder if Caroline just so happened to have a set of books and things on hand for situations like that. And that stands out for reasons that will make themselves apparent as we get through the story. Now, the story that she is reading, I will dig into more because I'm going to do another video for this movie concerning like signs, symbolisms, and things of that nature that are implemented in the movie through like that book, different books that show up, music, signs, bars, locations, this, that, and a third. But just to give a brief like explanation of what I feel like the excerpt of the text that she was reading to him, what I got from there is it's a mother and a daughter, and or a mother and a child, seems like a daughter though, are running away from something, and the daughter has been keeping a secret, and she reveals it to the mother, and the revealing of that secret creates more urgency for them to leave. Therefore, they leave out in the cold with nothing on their heads, showing that they're, it's an urgency, child. They ain't got time to be trying to gather this and that. They got to go. And when they get to some semblance of civilization, if you will, that they can use for support, they are getting turned away by some people. And then they eventually come upon this blind man that sets out to help them. And right at the time her patient passes away, she stops reading at a point where they are basically about to enter into some building or a home that the blind man is taking them into for refuge. And I feel like on one hand, it can be interpreted as a transition to heaven, where those big yellow doors that I mentioned in her reading could be perceived as the gates of heaven. And or there could be some foreshadowing in the midst of that text of Caroline feeling an urgency to flee and get into the place where she is supposed to be taking refuge. And child, we see what happens when we get throughout the movie. Now, when the patient passed away, Caroline seemed very emotionally detached, cold, and it starts to make sense after the lady comes back and tells her that none of his family wanted anything to do with him. And child, I'm wondering, what did he do? Why don't they want anything to do with him? Because, it's very... Now, we don't know too much of anything about this man, okay? But I'm just going based off of things that I have observed in life. And true enough, there are some people that are just evil and just cascade, people astray because they just evil. Howsoever, there are a lot of cases where just because people are elderly don't mean that they were good, nice, sweet people before they became elderly. And it'd be a lot of situations where a parent was abusive and or neglectful, abandoning, just straight up trifling to their kids. And then they get up there in age and disabled and all that, and their kids like, peace, oh well. You know what I'm saying? Or, could have always been distant and detached from their family. Like a father who walks out on a family. And then all of a sudden they get calls talking about, oh, he's in the hospital, or he's on hospice and this and that. And they just like, what I'm supposed to do? What you telling me for? You know what I'm saying? And even then, that may be like spiritually not the best thing to do, or not the best way to go about things, depending on the situation, how you look at it and all of that. At the same time, it's understandable how people get there. And all in all, it's just messed up. Like overall, it's just a messed up situation. And so Caroline clearly recognizes how messed up the whole thing and how heartless the whole thing is. Like, he didn't have people there to support him. Then as he's transitioned on, they still don't want to have anything to do with him. They don't even want to show up to identify and claim anything. So it's like, dang. And then she gathers the box to take it out back to, basically throw his stuff away in the dumpster. And she's looking around the dumpster. She looks in the dumpster and she has this realization of like how many people's boxes is stacked up in those dumpsters outside. Like, they whole backyard of the center is just a dumping grounds for all the passed on patients' stuff. And that's heartless in itself. And then that's why everything has become so heartless, because it's just like you experience that so many times, you're going to emotionally detach yourself because it's overwhelming. It's very emotionally overwhelming, especially when we find out about Caroline's background with her family and her parental. Now, it's at this moment where she basically realizes that she does not want to continue working at that center, that it's too much for her, it's not fulfilling her, it's draining her, she is ready to go. And before she dips, she had been admiring this key ring in Mr. Tuckhart. I believe she says his name. I believe that's how you say it. He's not on the cast list that I found. It doesn't seem. But I believe she says his name is Mr. Tuckhart, and that was her patient that she just lost. In the midst of his things, she's admiring this key ring of a guitar, and it says live fast, die young. And she really takes a liking to it. Takes so much of a liking to it that, honey, she takes it and puts it on her own key ring and dips out. Now, that key ring is a foreshadowing. And it's crazy she wasn't even thinking of it. Also, I'm wondering, did her taking that key ring have anything to do with anything that ended up happening? But honey, we're going to press on forward. Now, I believe where she was leaving from was St. Charles, Louisiana. And she took a bus on down to New Orleans. And in the midst of her travels, she is looking through this newspaper article, and she circles a job offering for a couple seeking a hospice nurse, and they're gonna pay $1,000 a week, and it's located in Terrebonne Parish. So she meets her friend, who is played by Joy Bryant. If you know, you know, okay. And her name is Jill. Joy Bryant's character in this movie, her name is Jill. She's friends with Caroline. She's her best friend, and she actually lives in New Orleans, and they meet on St. Mary Street at this bar called Half Moon. And child, apparently they still open to this day. And this particular place and street will also be discussed in the other video that I do for, the other signs, symbolism, special markings, and all that. As they meet here, they talking, they sipping. And Caroline ends up telling Jill that she is done with her job. Jill asks her what happened. She let her know that she lost a patient, and she just could no longer deal with the way that they were handling everything. Like, she felt like as soon as he passed away, they were ready to just ship him on out like a bag of trash. And she shows her the article, and Jill is like, Terrebonne Parish, honey, that is the swamps. Okay, we men down there missing teeth and all types of carrying on. That's where you want to go? And so Caroline is all swept up in her new motivation to care more, to really help somebody. And she's also, got plans of using the job and the pay. Now, $1,000 a week is pretty good. Probably now it would definitely be more than that. But in general, $1,000 a week ain't bad. The fact that she's a hospice nurse, though, and she's kind of like doing what she's doing, I would have thought she would have wanted more. You know what I'm saying? If I was doing that, I ain't gonna lie, I would want more, because there is a lot. But this also shows you that, where her heart and her head is. She's doing it more so for the sake of saving someone, if you will, than the money. The money is just a bonus, okay? And of course, she want to feed herself and all this, that, and the third. So her friend is continuing to tell her, like, that ain't the work, so I think you need to rethink this. And honestly, the fact that the job was paying $1,000 a week, and, it's live-in too, the fact that the job was paying $1,000 a week, whether that's a great amount of money or not such a great amount of money, it's a red flag. Because $1,000, people rarely say, like, I'm going to give you $1,000. I'm going to pay you $1,000 a week. They'll usually say, like, $1,100, $1,200, $1,500, or even $750. Yeah, stuff like that. Rarely is it a straight up, solid, even, right in the middle, like, beginning and the end type of number like that. And Caroline is so tunnel vision on her motivations that she wouldn't investigate or negotiate on that. But as Jill is pressing her, like, yo, I don't know about this, Caroline is like, let's dance. And it's totally understandable, because your girl is traumatized and drained. Now, the next day, Caroline is on the road again. In this, like, little Beetlebug-esque car. It's not quite a Beetle. It's a hatchback or something like that. Anywho, it's red, and it looked like an old Beetlebug. So she's rocking, Mr. Talkin. I wrote it down, Mr. Talkin. Like I said, she put that key ring on her key ring. And you can see it dangling from the key ring from the shot of her driving in the car. So that's another focus that was put on that key ring. And this time is as she is driving on her way to the swamps of Terrebonne Parish. And again, we getting a lot of beautiful ugliness, okay? It's real beautiful scenery, but it's also kind of gaunt and gothic looking. And that's one of my favorite things about this movie, that everything is Southern Gothic to a T. Okay? So yeah, she pulled up to the house, honey. It is huge. And of course she has to go down this dirt road encompassed and cloaked with moss trees. Oh my gosh. It is so grand to take in. And the beautiful ugliness of the house is grand to take in as well. And the house is a mansion. And I find it so interesting, and also, like, it says something. It's something to be evaluated and researched as to why and how Louisiana, specifically New Orleans, has been able to still have basically slave homes, the big houses, the mansions, the plantation homes where slavery was going on, essentially, those types of homes. That's what that mansion is. And those types of houses and buildings can still be seen around New Orleans to this day. And child, just a little segue. I used to play this game on my iPad called Gangstar New Orleans or whatever. And it's set post Katrina. And there's literally this whole area in New Orleans that is flooded out, but you can still see certain ruins of old plantation homes that are semi-covered by water, some that are off the way, like out the way of the water. And it's just, it's just so beautifully ugly, so ugly beautiful, and it's just eerie and just so interesting. But yeah, all that to say, honey, she done pulled up, and she is not recognizing that the area that she is in is destitute. Like, she's not peeping the red flags of this house looking very haunted. Like, these people knew that you were coming, and they didn't, like, you know what I'm saying, make no type of special arrangements or nothing. Granted, it's a lot going on, but Shawty not peeping red flags. She looking at the area, and she's looking at everything as, oh my gosh, these people need me. Like, oh my gosh, I can help them fix this up. I can help them make this all better. Okay, honey. Now, you can hear a chair squeaking from outside, right? So if you can hear that chair squeaking, then they could also hear her calling from the porch loud, hello, 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 like knocking on the door and whatnot. I'm pretty sure that they can hear that, you know what I'm saying? So let's keep that in mind. She walks in the house, and of course, as I've already said, the house is old. It looks like it ain't been updated since slavery. And there is food on the stove, but also the table is set and a meal has been eaten. It looks both like they've eaten and are preparing to eat again. Tea has been drank and all that. Now, she makes her way outdoors to basically the backyard area. It's really kind of more like the center yard, but we're going to call it the backyard. So there's an elderly couple outdoors. The woman is cutting her husband's hair. Caroline stares on, and this young guy pops out of a bag on our ass, walking up behind her, startling her and whatnot, startling us, talking about that's real love and devotion. Not like the stuff you read about. In his, like, white man New Orleans accent. Now look, I ain't trying to be funny, but there does seem to be a difference between certain types of white man's New Orleans accent versus black men's New Orleans accent versus the, like, country, like, I don't know, hillbilly New Orleans accent. Is a difference. This man talk like Tamar Braxton ex-fiance, the white guy from that show that she was on. He talk like him, okay? So his name is Luke, and he's the estate attorney. And he lets Caroline know that the doctor thinks he only has a month to live. He being Ben. Him being Ben. Y'all, I'm from Mississippi. So sometimes I have to, you know what I'm saying, speak legibly. So I can make sure y'all understand what I'm saying, okay? Okay. And Luke goes on talking about, his wife is grieving, and in the midst, he finally realizes that he done startled the crap out of Caroline, and Caroline done dropped some stuff. He got to help her pick it up, and he apologized and all that. Okay? So this is when we find out that the wife's name is Violet Devereaux. Now, I know that that's a French last name, but for the sake of the movie, I got to point out a possible symbolic element here, whereas Devereaux kind of sounds like Devil Road. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, Luke introduces them, and Violet gives Caroline this nasty, fierce look. Caroline compliments the home. She got a lovely home, lovely garden, all that. Child, Violet ain't trying to hear it, baby. Storms off. Now, like I said, You would think that these are just the reasonable reactions of a wife premeditating the grief of losing her husband and she just having a hard time. She on edge. But okay, honey, stay with me. Luke apologizes on Violet's behalf and states she just old-fashioned. She's a little uncomfortable by strangers being in the house. Hell, she old South and still think that women supposed to be out here curtsying that everything. Nah, Kara segues from that to asking him, can Ben talk at all? So this is some of her, like, just doing her job, the protocols that come with it, getting to know Ben more, because that's who she's there for. Not to be patty caking and babysitting Miss Violet's feelings, honey. We're gonna be considerate, but we ain't finna be up here babysitting her feelings. Let's focus on the subject at hand. So Luke tells her that Ben can't talk. A stroke paralyzed him on both sides, after she asked which side was impacted. And Violet found him in the attic, is what Luke lets be known. Violet come out fussing. She not from the South. She not gonna understand my house. And then listen to how she talk. Child, Violet don't like her accent. Luke says she's from New Orleans. Violet said she wasn't raised here. Caroline lets them know that she is from, not born. She was born in New Orleans. But she was raised in Hoboken, New Jersey. Luke said she's the last one left. Violet keep going on about, honey, she won't understand the house, la. Caroline is about fed up, like, this lady ain't finna keep insulting me. I can't help nobody that don't want to be helped. Honey, I can get on down and try somebody else. Luke trying to talk her down and, further emphasizing the need to sympathize with Violet and how she must feel in her position. And he laying it on thick. He like, they need help. And you being here means that Ben is really dying. She's losing the love of her life. And Caroline points out, well, honey, that's gonna happen whether I'm there or not. And so a look on Luke's face gives, oh, yeah, you're right. That line ain't what I thought it was. Okay? Keep that a subtle reaction in mind, too. Because him saying that was a slip of the slip. Caroline asks him, what does Violet mean by she won't understand the house? Now, on the surface, I would say that what she means by that is it is a plantation house. So there are certain things, like I said, it looks like it hasn't been updated since that time. So there are certain things about the house that is made specifically to possibly hold slaves, punish slaves, discard, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that, stuff that's for like certain types of labor, old timey stuff before you had like electronics and things that you would use to make certain stuff easier. And then also the spiritual elements of it all. Even before we get to the nitty gritty of the spiritual elements, there are other just consistent, common spiritual elements that all people tend to have. Well, most people of the South tend to have around their house. And then also the fact that it was obviously a slavery plantation home. Ain't no telling what types of spirits lingering up in there. Okay? And I don't know. If Caroline was more tapped in to her southern roots, she said she was born there and everything. I know it's a difference being born and raised there versus being born there and moving and being raised somewhere else. But it's like, you can clearly see that Caroline's emotional detachment has resulted in a intuition detachment, which makes perfect sense because your emotions are attached to your intuition, okay? And we're gonna see how this turns out. So when she asked him that, Luke gonna say, oh, I just get paid. I don't know nothing about that. And that contradicts what he was saying and the fact that he was even just preaching to her. You came out of nowhere, startled her, giving her all the rundown of all there is to know about being in Violet and what's going on with his condition and all this, that, and the third. And now all of a sudden she asks what she mean about the stuff about the house. And all of a sudden you just get paid. Okay. And in the midst of his interaction with her, he also doing quite a bit of little subtle flirting. And initially you could take that as a little southern charm, just being a little southern charm. But me being a southerner myself, this man is flirting with her. Very intentional about it. Now, Kate Hudson is a cute girl. She's a nice looking pretty woman. She got a nice face. So Caroline, of course, got a nice face. So I don't blame him trying to lay it on thick with her. You understand? Okay. But he basically lets Caroline know, she's staying, put in a good word for you. I'm going to help you transition into your new job and everything comfortably as possible. And Caroline is like, how you going to do that? So he like, I'm going to tell her she won't find nobody better than you. And she better treat you like it. Okay. And we're going to revisit that line in the signs, symbolism, and other things video as well. Along with a statement that he makes to her right before that. See, he calls himself relating to her by saying that, after he says the check's cleared, he just gets paid and all that. He says, if it makes you feel any better, I'm still looking for my dream job too. How do you know that she's looking for a dream job? How do you know that? Disclaimer. I'm filming this over a course of days. Because one, it's a movie. Two, it's a whole lot of twists, turns, a whole lot of deep shit going on. So, it's extensive work that is being done and extensive time that is being put into this here review. So, I said all that to say, I watch the movie, play it again, whatever, what have you, each time I come back to record, to make sure that everything gets tight. And with that being said, I was able to peep back at that introduction scene with Caroline and Luke. So, he walks outside with a box. Originally, I said that he walked outside, startled her, and she dropped papers that she had. But I was tripping, child. She had no papers. He had a box full of documentation and things. And when he walked out there, in the midst of him greeting her, well, barely greeting her, but in the midst of him startling her, the bottom of the box fell in and fell out, and everything hit the ground. Now, that's important to note because that box and all that documentation that was in the box is going to show back up. Initially, we can perceive it as things that he's using, because he's the estate lawyer. So, of course, he got documentation on the family concerning, like, whose name stuff is in, insurance, everything that matters as it concerns wills and stuff being left behind. Now, the heavy emphasis on stuff being left behind and who's going to be left behind too and all this, that, and the third should also be a red flag to Caroline, because Ben is the one who has the, like, chronic health issue, is on hospice and all that. Violet is an elderly woman, but she's not, like, downtrodden or nothing. She's still able to get around for herself. She been taking care of Ben all this time, right? So granted, as an elderly woman, she shouldn't have, certain parts of the labor on her body, like lifting him up, putting him in the tub, and, things of that nature, having to stay up all night and shit like that. But, regardless, she been doing all that she been doing, and she do all that she do up and down the stairs, gardening, carrying on, and she gets around pretty fast and all of that. So why are we acting like both of them dying? Why are we acting like both of them dying? Because, see, neither one of them are, like, that old. Like, they old, but they not that old. They giving, like, 60s. Like they in their 60s. And if Ben hadn't, quote unquote, had his stroke and all of that, he would probably be still kind of, getting around just as well as Violet. Okay? So they still had, at least 20 years ahead of him, And of course, being in his position now, that's not, but Violet, she still would have had at least about 20 years ahead of her, at least. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Just keep that on your mind. And to answer my own question as to how Luke would have known that Caroline was, on the path to finding her dream job and all of that, I gotta know. As she called to, make it known that she's applying for the job and how to get there, but, she come in for the interview and all that good stuff, Luke is who she talked to. So, it's to be assumed that she may have mentioned that in her sales pitch. You gotta write like what's some letters you have to write? It's a certain type of letter you gotta write when you apply for a job, basically telling why you would be good for the job, what's your motivation and passion for the job and all that. Well, she didn't have to write no letter. She called and she likely said something about, she's still seeking her dream job in the midst of the phone call, selling herself and whatnot. So that's potentially how he got that information. Howsoever, what we should note here is that Luke been taking notes on her. Now, granted, he's a lawyer. That's a part of his training. That's a part of his, natural abilities as someone who has a niche for lawyership, right? Being observant, taking notes on people, following patterns and all that. But don't get caught up in that, honey. Don't get caught up in that. Okay, so he, spit that little corny line talking about, I'm going to tell Violet that you the best she gonna find and she better start treating you like it and all that. So then we transition to the next day. Carrie is packing up. Okay, and just so y'all know, I'm going to be periodically calling Caroline Carrie for short, because that's what I heard Jill do. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so Carrie is packing up all her stuff so she can go move into the folks' house. She got Jill there with her. And Jill is cracking jokes like, don't you be out there playing a game, signing up for their clubs, going to bingo. Because you know they'll suck you into their lifestyle. So Gary is like, what's your beef with the elderly ma'am? And Jill just laugh her off. But what I think it is that Jill knows and can peep that Carrie be very emotionally invested in her work, and she gets very emotionally attached and, like I said, invested with her patients and everything, and that can really like start to take a toll on her, much like her previous job did. And all at the same time, Caroline seems to be uncomfortable getting deep in her emotions at the same time. So she's not going to thoroughly vent to Jill, but Jill can still peep it. So Jill be trying to be a friend to her in the way of acknowledging her feelings and making her laugh, trying to make her feel better and stuff all at the same time. And so when Jill is cracking those jokes like that, saying like, they'll suck you into their lifestyle and this and that, that's Jill playfully reminding her to not lose sight of herself. Because we also learned at the bar that they are 25. They're like 25. Well, Caroline stated her age, but I'm assuming that both of them are the same age. So I'm going to say that both of them are 25. And being a friend, in your 20s, y'all cool and all of that, and your friend is involved. I got a friend that is basically in healthcare, and she has to basically listen to the elderly vent about a lot of their issues, healthcare issues and things of that nature. A lot, and that stuff can, start to take a toll on her. So she has to work very hard to not lose sight of herself and also not lose sight of her youth. And that's a heavy theme throughout this movie as well, the theme of youth. And that's also what Jill is picking at, basically, telling Carrie, don't die with your father. Don't die with your patients. You know what I'm saying? Don't forget your youth. Don't forget to be youthful. And this is not even just thinking of youth as in the amount of years that she's been on earth, making her a young person and shit like that. This is also youth as a mindset. And keep that in mind as we discuss Violet, okay? And we'll come back to that subject when we get there. But also, in the other video that I'm going to do with the signs of symbolism and everything, I'm going to look back at some of Jill's warnings and stuff like that, and her jokes and such, and see if we can, like, theorize that she may have sensed more than what she was letting on. Because, mind you, she actually lives in New Orleans and seemed like she was actually born, raised, and continued to live in New Orleans. Okay? So, again, hold that thought, all right? We get another banging ass song that we gonna touch back on in the Signs and Symbols video, okay? Right after Jill hugs Caroline goodbye, and Caroline heads on up the road, honey, on the road again. On the road again. Okay, so she notices that her gas hand is right on E. And she ain't got no choice but to stop at this, like, eerily sketchy looking gas station. And at the entrance, right by the threshold, there is a line drawn in red brick. There's herbs, bones, and other voodoo hoodoo paraphernalia and arrangements and whatnot all around. A peculiar record is playing that we gonna hear a variation of again sooner and later. So, Carrie, once again, is reminiscent of when she arrived at the big house the first time, where you hearing things, so you know somebody there, and she calling out, but don't nobody hear her. Okay, so it's alligator heads, and you hear a baby crying, like I said, that record is playing, all that, and she calling out, hey, I just want some gas, is anybody here, da-da-da-da. She turns around and notices this blind elderly lady standing in this room that has a screen door, look like it's a table in there with a chair next to it. It looks real dilapidated, okay? Looking real dilapidated. And she's holding the baby that we hear crying. So a young woman comes out behind her and escorts her away. And she's speaking Creole. And these are black people, black Creoles, just to specify. So when a young lady escorts off what I can assume is her grandma and the baby, Caroline turns around and bumps into this very tall, dark-skinned Creole man. And he's speaking Creole to her. And basically he asking her, like, can he help her? You want some gas? And I ain't gonna lie, he could have been saying, bitch, watch where the fuck you going, bumping into me and shit. But I also want to point out that Caroline didn't really seem scared until she bumped into the black man. For the most part, she was looking at the scenery and she was looking at the old lady and the baby and the young lady pretty much in the same way that she was looking at the big house and being situation and all of that. More so looking at it like a place that needs charity, people who need charity. But when she bumped into that man, That's when some fear got into her. And I don't think I have to go too deep into the racial implicit bias elements of that. I'm not saying that Caroline is racist. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking about an implicit bias that showed up when she bumped into him, because everything else is looking like you need to get up out of there. But that black man is what freaks you out. Now, mind you, he is walking around with a knife and an oyster in his hand. I'm talking about he walking around to seem like he just picking up oysters out the mud and chopping them open and eating them, honey, like it's apples or something. And I'm quite sure that's a thing. But just the combination of everything going on around the scenery of it all just gives girl tread lightly. So he like is 17 for the gas. She hands him a 20 and say keep the change, and she scurries on up out of there. Nah, she back at the ranch at the Devereaux house, unpacking, stares intently at a pic of her and her father when she was a child. It's just a little cute, petite, little adorable something, okay? She starts to notice as she goes into the bathroom that there are no mirrors. There are no mirrors in my Nana's house. So she's completed her packing, walking around the house, calling out for Violet, still seeking that formal introduction. And basically, tour around the house, okay? This big old fortress that y'all staying in. But she still gets no answer from Violet. And you won't convince me that Violet don't hear her, okay? So she heads on into Ben's room, introduces herself to him, turns on his light. She like, you don't get much light around here, honey. And she's maneuvering things around the sheets and carrying on, making him, trying to make him more comfortable. Okay. And she notices that there's blues playing. She's like, you like blues, huh? My daddy used to like blues too. And before she can even finish her sentence, honey, Ben done grabs her arm tightly, aggressively, and staring at her frighteningly. And she's obviously perturbed, but she manages to, kind of keep it together to not like scream out or anything. But she's like, dude, you gotta let go. You gotta let go. You're hurting me, child. So in the midst of that, Violet storms in, talking about, it's time for his remedies. And when Violet busts in, he lets her go. Now, ain't that interesting that she storms in now?
Ouch, there you are. Time for his remedies. Scoot over, child. 9 in the morning and 7 at night. He takes his pills in powder form. I'll show you how. Be sure he drinks it all down. What's he taking? Oh, Coumadin and such. He gets a tremor sometimes. Don't let that frighten you. And a kiss to make it taste better.
Now, Violet is full of all types of crap, child. Talking about, oh, there you are. You knew where she was. You knew what it was giving, honey. You knew. Stop the man. And then has yet to properly greet her, child. All of these are tactics. All of these are tactics. Oh, you coming in here talking about time for some remedies. Okay, yeah. She giving him his medicine, child. Done just pulled the stuff all down his throat. I'm talking about, it looks forcible, right? But you wouldn't quite think nothing of it because he is, disabled, and he got some stroke-like discrepancies going on with his mouth, a numbness around the mouth area. So she would have to kind of just do that. Okay, let's go ahead and get. So y'all heard in the clip, Caroline asked her what she was giving him. And I don't know how to say the word she used. We'll revisit that in the signs and symbols video, okay? And we'll also kind of revisit that later on in this review. But these remedies, quote unquote, are a part of his meds. They're meant to tone down his spasms, okay? Ultimately, it's like supposed to be acting like Ritalin, if you will, or like muscle relaxer type shit. Now, I'm not saying that's what it is, but I'm saying, she says he has spasms, he gets worked up, all this, that, and the third. Like, him grabbing on Caroline is supposed to be an example of his spasms. He started tripping, okay, having seizures and such. He started tripping, okay, tweaking out. You feel me? So give him his remedies that keep him at bay for, the meantime, in between time, which is between the hours of 9 and 7, 7 to 9. That's 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. So basically, round the clock, trying to keep your boy tamed.
You're scrawnier than I'd hoped. Prettier, though. I bet you're all marked up, aren't you? Marked up? Written on. I know you young people always jabbing yourself with ink and needles. You're written on, aren't you? Not where you can see.
Now, honey, that is a very ancient-ass way of asking somebody if they got tattoos. But something about it is also kind of primal and demeaning. And speaking of which, like a snake, Violet is sizing Caroline up in more ways than one. And I feel like Caroline saying that, she ain't got no tattoos anywhere where she can see. Some part of me feel like that's a sly way of telling Violet to kiss her ass. And I think Violet kind of caught it.
Babe daily has linens changed, and don't bother with the housework. I'm the only one that knows how. So how long have you two lived here? Oh, let's see. We came over from Savannah in 62. We bought this house from a brother and a sister. They'd inherited it a long time ago from their parents. Lived here since they were children. There. Martin and Grace. Sure, people. But they fell on hard times. Had to sell. You keep their picture. Yes. I like to pay my respects to the memories of this house.
Again, she has yet to formally greet this lady, introduce herself, be introduced to her, all that shit. And she leads into showing her around the house and giving her the rundown on everything by demeaningly asking her if she got tattoos. Okay, and segue into you change all his linens and bathe them daily and all this, that, and the third. Don't be doing the housework because I'm the only one that know how. Keep that in mind. Don't be doing no housework because she the only one that know how. Now, that's kind of some typical Southern Belle stuff because they don't want you finagling nothing in their house. They got stuff laid in places for a reason, and they also don't want you all up in their business finding out no secrets and things. And that can be real simple. But as we proceed to give y'all what y'all need, Caroline asked her how long they've been living there. And Violet says basically since 1962, they came over from Savannah, Georgia. Now, I'm saying Savannah, Georgia because that's a Savannah that I'm familiar with. I'm not sure. It's a possibility that it could be a Savannah, Louisiana, bars, but I believe they're referring to Savannah, Georgia. But that's beside the point. Now, in the signs and symbols vid, we'll get more into the specificities of everything that Violet says, but let's just keep the ball rolling on the happenings of it all. So she's telling her this story. They came over from Savannah in 1962. And they bought the house from these two siblings named Martin and Grace. She calls them charming people. And honey, she said they had done fell on hard times. They had lived in the house all their life. By 1962, when they bought it from them, basically it seems as though they was struggling. So they needed to sell the house. They bought it from them. Honey, she still got their picture in the house sitting up on like what looks like a little fireplace stand type thing or whatever, right? Caroline like, you still keep that picture? She's like, yeah, honey, I like to preserve all the history of the house. That's some weird shit. Because who does that? Like, even with that, like, if that's the case, why would them folks give you their childhood photo? And it's 1962. Now, I'm a youngin', so I could be a little ignorant. But how many copies of their childhood photos would they actually have in 1962, especially if they were adults in 1962? And that gives that it was even more back in the day when they was kids. So again, how many copies would they have of their childhood photos? So they would just be like, they're selling their house, their childhood home that they lived in forever, basically. And they gonna also leave behind their childhood photo? It seems like they would want to keep something like their childhood photo. That's just very interesting. Unless you could say, they bought it from, but still they bought the house. Like, that just does not make sense. So this is a major red flag that Caroline is not peeping. Along with the fact that when Caroline picks up the picture from behind the picture that is only Martin and Grace as kids, out falls a picture of Martin and Grace with two what looks to be servants. And they are black adults, a black couple, posed with the children very endearingly. And on the back of it, you see the names Papa Justify and Mama Cecile.
This is a dining room. We only use about half of the rooms. The others are for Ben's antique business. What he couldn't sell, we stored here. Except for the attic. That has crystal and china, and I keep a very close account on that, just so as you know. There are more than 30 rooms in all. In the old days, they made a separate key for each room. For the owner, they made a skeleton key. This will open every door. This one is yours. I have mine. Now, the pantry's right out here. Oh, we may have to ask you to go into town now and then.
A mirror here once. I noticed in the bathrooms also there are no mirrors.
Child, when you get as worn out and wrinkled as we are, you don't need any reminding. If you want a small one for your own purposes, that's fine with me. What you do with them? Put them away.
So Violet continues to take her throughout the house, shows her the dining room, lets her know where the pantry is, lets her know that sometimes she may have to run into town, which is ultimately, people say town. They say you want to run into town, that's where everything is. Food places, stoves, all that. She tells her that they don't really use all the rooms in the house. Of course not, because it's over 30 of them, honey. And again, more indication and elements of this having been a plantation home, slave era. And she said they used, majority of the rooms to store what was Ben's antique business and everything. And she stores china up in the attic. Now, Violet is telling her all of these things very intentionally. She is telling her everything that she wants her to know, giving her enough information and not giving her enough information to pique her interest, confuse her, and make her mind wander, amongst giving her what is called a skeleton key. Based on what I've looked at and read, I think that this key was actually made of bones. But yes, letting her know that it opens every door in the house. Amongst, like I said, telling her that it's a billion fucking rooms in the house and they don't use all of them and all this, that, and the third. So that type of shit is gonna make a person feel powerful and want to exercise their power through curiosity, being nosy. Amongst that, the youthful element of vanity, the vanity element of youth, peeks its head in, whereas Caroline is reminded that she needs mirrors, honey. Where your mirrors at? Was a mirror here once? What you done with the mirrors, honey? Caroline talking about she put them away. You know, don't want to look at herself because she old and wrinkly. That's what she gives. Now, here's where a cultural divide comes into play. Because most people born and raised in the South would see Miss Lady not having no mirrors in that house as a, I'm not going to say a red flag, but I am going to say a spiritual flag, okay? Because Caroline isn't peeping that there's a thin veil of spirituality going on with them mirrors being missing. And she would have known that if she was a thoroughbred Southerner. But she not peeping that because she from the North and that ain't nothing that she is competent on. So she just kind of seeing it as Violet being a weird old lady. But what I think Caroline is feeling like initially is that Violet may be abusive to Ben. But we'll revisit that. Violet tells her if she wants to keep her small mirror for herself, she can do that, but she'll need to put it away when she's done with it. Again, that's another red flag. This lady seems afraid of mirrors. Not want to look at herself. She seems afraid of mirrors.
And for the most part, just realize that I'll live here as if you're not in residence. After all, we're not kin. Are your parents still alive?
Well, my mom left when I was little. My dad raised me, and he died last year.
Oh, my. So you cared for him as well?
I would have. I just thought I had more time.
Yeah. You think too much about the time you have left. You don't spend it living. Be good to my husband. Be good to his house. Remedies at 9.
So Violet pretty much takes another nasty, subtle, rude jab at Caroline, telling her that she's pretty much going to exist and move around the house as if she's not there. After all, we not kin. You not my family. As she segues into vulnerable territory of asking Caroline, does she, have any relatives, keep in touch with her parents still alive, and all this, that, and the third. And Caroline gives her backstory, a little bit of it concerning that her mama left her when she was younger, her daddy raised her, and he died not very long ago. So Violet assumes that she cared for him as well. And Caroline corrects her like, no, didn't get the chance, thought she had more time. So the way that she says this gives indication that she has some regret and resentment there, which also gives that she has some guilt there. She feels like she took advantage of time. She didn't do everything that she needed to do while her father was still alive. Mind you, notes are being taken on Caroline. These questions and things are being said and implemented very intentionally and very strategically. Again, Violet likes to take rude jabs at Caroline before she starts somewhat vulnerable conversations with her. Be keen on that. Also be keen on that line that Violet spits back to Caroline. You think too much about the time you have left, you won't spend it living. And to conclude that conversation about time, she tells her remedies at 9. Bars. Now the next morning, Caroline is bathing Ben, and child, she dunks him in that water, and he looked like it was the best thing that could have ever happened in his life. Anywho, after the bath, she gets him in his wheelchair and gets him into the wheelchair elevator type situation, and that particular scene allows you to see the many stories, floors of the house. And that creepy grand staircase, interesting. And a whole lot of, you gotta ask yourself, why a couple with no kids, mind you, decided to move into this giant house? There has to be more to the story, like, you know what I'm saying? And then you honestly gotta ask, why don't they have any kids? I don't know. It just seems more typical to whereas maybe they would get the house with plans of having a load of kids. And of course, he had his business, so use space for that. And, whatever it was that she had going on, use spaces for that, her collections and shit. But at a certain point, it seems as though you would either adopt or say, okay, things are winding down. Let's, doesn't seem like they're gonna be having no kids. Let's go ahead and, sell this house, move into something still beautiful, but a bit smaller and not so whole lot of. And certainly once one of the spouses ends up in, a disabled type situation, Anyway, child, she rolls him on out into the garden. And Violet's out there getting her entire life. I mean, this is like the happiest that we've seen her since the movie started, okay? So this gives us some extra dimensionality on Violet. She is really giddy when it comes to gardening. And very shady in the process, of course. Telling Carrie, I just bet you never seen a garden like this before in Jersey. And Carrie's like, it's the Garden State. And Violet's like, well, I seriously doubt that. Beautiful flowers gone in the winter and back in the springtime. Just disrespectful. And this is an interesting segue, huh? So, keep in mind that pattern. Rude and then tapping into vulnerable territory. So, after shading Carrie once again, Violet segues on into a question talking about, are you religious at all? And Carrie just said she likes to keep an open mind. Violet gives her a little slight approving nod at that. Then taps over, oh, I forgot my trillions. Oh, Carrie, please run up to the attic for me. I got some seed packets up there in the attic. So Carrie goes on up there and everything looks just as creepy and run down and old and grand, just as everything else around the territory, okay? She's thumping around and she finds the packets and then she hears a thumping coming from the back of the attic. She tips toes on nosily over to where like some canister or something is sitting in front of this little door. And baby, the door is a rumbling and a shaking and a rumbling and a shaking violently. You literally think there was a living being up there. Maybe. So, just like a nosy white lady in a horror movie that she is. And of course, with all the little sprinkles of weird shit that Violet done put in her head, she gonna go ahead and try to use her key to try to open up this door. To no avail. So, the door she had done come in with all that extra stuff that was going on, it slammed honey and scared her about half to death. So she decides to go ahead and tiptoe on up out of there. And as she tiptoes on up out of there, you hear that door continue to thump. So she gets downstairs and damn near it runs into Violet, okay? Now, you can't tell me that Violet didn't set her up for that, honey. I told you, everything that she is saying and doing to Caroline is very intentional and very strategic. And she definitely knew what she was doing by sending her up there to get some doggone seed packets. You had that big old basket full of seed packets of flowers. You just needed that particular flower that bad. Especially after you already said that your China is up there and you keep a close watch on it. Why would you send somebody somewhere that you got paranoia about, obviously? Okay. So, yeah, she bumps into Violet, who has come in to investigate what is taking her so long. Caroline apologizes and then, quickly asks her, and I'm like, girl, why you so, you just a little bit, too straightforward sometimes. You don't see that, I don't know. She feel like she got a lot of power in this situation, and it's very interesting to me. But we'll take back into it a little later, perhaps. So, she asking Violet, oh, I thought the key is supposed to open up every door. It doesn't open up the one in the attic. And Violet downplays her question and what she talking about and all that. And is like, oh, that's been locked since we moved in. We don't know what's in there. It's never opened it. Blah, blah, blah. And suddenly, still in her kind of lightheartedness, facetiousness, all that. Just taking Miss Carrie through some emotional roller coasters, but it's still in the territory where you can just chalk it up to her having a like I said, premeditated or foreshadowing grieving of dealing with the emotions of her husband going down. You feel me? So Carrie's fucking up here because don't be asking her about that shit. Just keep observing, girl. You showing your hand too much. You showing your hand way too much. But like I said, we'll get back to that, okay? Okay. So, Carrie then taps in further, and it's like, wait a minute. I mean, Ben was up in the attic when he had his stroke, right? What was he doing? And Violet's like, well, you'll have to ask him. And check on him while you're at it, please. I wonder if he'd like some tea. Bitch, you know good and well that she can't ask Ben nothing because he can't talk, right? So you just this shady. And this is another indication that's giving us to where Caroline is noticing weird things, but she's not chalking it up to like anything really supernatural, spiritual, or sinister, or no shit like that. For real, she's feeling like this is a case of elderly abuse type shit. So, later that night, Carrie is showering in the bathroom and she got herself a little miniature personal mirror that seems to be attracting and or have awakened some type of spirit whose shadow is lurking around her on down to heaven. Footsteps that we can hear. And I believe she heard them too, honey. And I didn't notice this before until I watched it this past time to do this video. That's crazy, you know? So then transitions to her being in bed, tossing and a-turning, and she hears a rumbling and something falling and crashing. Mind you, it's thundering and lightning outside. Something terrible. So she gets up and she creeps on around the house. Y'all, this house is so freaking scary at night. It reminds me of my grandma's house in Lexington, Mississippi before it got burned down, child. But the house was slick big. And at night, it was very scary, especially the fact that it was up on top of a hill, surrounded by trees. Yeah. But anywho, she makes her way on up them stairs into Ben's room. Notices that he's out of bed. His wheelchair is still in the room. She running around the house looking in different rooms. Now, in one of these doors that she opens, it looks like a children's room. Hold it out, okay? So she makes her way back into the room. You know, she taps on one of the other doors and she's like, his door was locked. So she like thinking like, what the freak? How he get out? Where could he be? His door was locked. Violet ain't answering. Like, what is going on? So she goes back in the room and opens up the window, sticks her head out, calling his name. And she noticed that this man is out on the roof. Running away, love. Running away, love. Running away, love. Running away, love. La, 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 la. Like, what the hell, sir? Like, I could only imagine from Caroline's point of view how she must feel. Like, bruh, really? And like, especially the fact that it's one thing if he was like partially disabled, he just have a hard time getting up and down and shit. No, this man supposed to be paralyzed. This man supposed to be down for the count. And he's out on the roof. Corralling. And she up here calling his name, talking about stop right there. He like, hell no, bitch, I'm getting the fuck on down. And he tries his best, and boy takes a tumble. Down goes Frazier into a muddy, wet puddle of leaves and mud and all of nature's nastiness. Just terrible. Prayers up for Ben, child. Caroline rushes out in a tizzy. She banging on Violet's door, yelling her name. Honey, come help her. She runs out to try to get Ben. Ben is low-key, high-key like, bitch, get the fuck off of me. I ain't going nowhere.
What you doing? Got out of the window. I thought you said he was dead. Yeah, did you make sure he drank them all down? I thought so. Then what did they make you do? His door was locked. Oh, just go get the wheelchair. We gotta get out. We're not a doctor. In the morning, just get that wheelchair now.
So Caroline rushes up to get the wheelchair and notices a bunch of shit is knocked over in his room. Sheets hanging all up off the bed. So I guess she either picks up the sheet to fix it back up straight on the bed, or she picked it up to use it as like something to cover Ben as they shuffle him back into the house, because you know it's raining, it's wet, you know, something to comfort him with or whatever. But she notices that, child, I don't know what he did this with. I'm very afraid of what he might have etched this sentence into the sheets with. But he's etched "help me" into the sheets. So she balls up the sheets, stuffs them in the closet. I believe she stuffed them in the closet in her room. But y'all, in the midst of that, Violet is just calling her name repetitively, honey. And I know that the writers had to name the character Caroline very intentionally, because it does sound, it sounds so Southern Gothic, especially amongst this huge, dark-ass house. And it's dark outside, and it's raining profusely, and then you got this old creepy Southern lady with this old creepy Southern lady voice calling Caroline amongst the damn rain and thunder and lightning. So Caroline makes her way back on out, and Violet is like, what in damn nation took you so long? And she gets on down there, she apologizing and all this, that, and the third, and Violet's like, we just gonna have to double his remedies. Now let's rewind a little bit. In the audio that I had play for y'all there from the movie that gives Violet rushing outside like, oh my goodness, Lord have mercy, what done happened? And in the midst of that, you hear her say, did you give him his remedies? And Caroline says, yes, you made him drink them all down? I thought so. And Violet then says, oh, Ben, what did they make you do? What did who? Who? What did who make him do? What? And here again is where we got to backtrack and ask, what are these remedies? What's the tea? And we'll tap deeper into this particular scene as well in the Signs and Symbols video. And if need be, which will be very likely, we'll double back to it for different reasons as we go throughout the review of the movie. Now, she comes back out, Violet talking about doubling his remedies and all of that. They hustling and bustling to get him up and get him in the chair. And all the while, Ben is trying to grab Caroline and finally kind of gets a hold of her as they're lifting him up to put him in a chair. And he's looking at her very intentionally, very much so trying to communicate with his eyes, with his energy, non-verbally. And by Caroline's response to the load of things, I feel like this is another indication and emphasis on Caroline still kind of in the dark, no pun intended, thinking that this is just elderly abuse. So the lightning flashes and we transition out of that into the next morning, and Caroline is out walking around the yard, around the area where Ben fell, and she's like, what were you trying to do? Where were you trying to go? Like, she's investigating the scene or whatever. And she noticed, and we noticed, the swamp, lake, water area. There's a boat, and there's also water in itself. So this is kind of open-ended. You kind of just have to, like, interpret for yourself what Caroline may be piecing together by the scene here. But what I got from it is that she felt like he was either trying to try his luck in the boat or drown himself in the swamp. Which, suicide and trying to get away is something that goes on in elderly abuse, similar to child abuse. So yeah, and in the midst of that, we get creepy old Luke, the attorney, popping out of nowhere, all ghostly and things once again, talking about, you only been here 2 days and he's already trying to kill himself. Disrespectful. But y'all, I'm gonna halt the review right there. This will likely be a 3-parter because it has a lot of different parts. But child, thus far, Violet is giving Caroline the entire blues. Ben is out here stressed and depressed and under duress. Caroline, she ain't doing too fine. She's so smart, she dumb. And she is like so emotionally vulnerable and emotionally detached all at the same time. Well, let me say this. Emotionally vulnerable and mentally misdirected. And all the while, like I said, tunnel vision. And that's causing her to miss a whole lot. Okay? She's seeing some red flags, but it ain't the red flags that are the reddest of the flags that are designated for her. And we're leaving off with her getting a whole lot more than what she bargained for. And thus far feeling like Ben may be being abused by Violet. Which I can't blame her too much because from her point of view, it makes sense as to why she would interpret her experience and observation in such a way. Howsoever, like I said, there's a cultural divide, kind of like the divide is causing a noise in her perspective, because if she was more experienced and in tune with the Gothic side of the South, she would notice more of the reddest of the flags that are designated for her. But all that being said, child, if I do say so myself, honey, I have milked this cow dry for now. And I'm thoroughly appreciative for the exchange of vibes. And if you're feeling synchronized, please do me a divine design and like, share, and subscribe so that you can be one of the first to be back through these queenly quotas for the next time. And be sure to bless my comment section with your questions and conversations. And as always, I bid you all light, love, healing, and liberation. Emphasis on liberation. Mwah.